translations. There was a great Jew here in Yerushalayim. His name was Rabbi Yosef Kapach, Kafich, and he translated the Perush HaMishnayos from the original Arabic into Hebrew. And in his work, he points out always the differences of nuance that exist between his translation and other translations, some of which really are major in terms of understanding what the Rambam wrote. The problem with all translations is that the nuance never comes across. The languages are very, very difficult to interchange. If you have any doubt, you'll look at the subtitles on this video or any other video and shown here in Israel. And if you know the English and you see how they translate it into the Hebrew, sometimes it's funny. Because idioms don't translate. It's just, a way of speaking. Nuances, very difficult to get it across. Now, there are some people who are expert translators. The people, for instance, who translated Solzhenitsyn into English. So that's fabulous because you feel the author carries through. Even though you don't know Russian, and I'm certain that we miss a lot of it, but nevertheless the whole package somehow comes through because it's not just a word-by-word translation. Is able to capture the emotion of the words as well. So there are people who are great experts in it, but as we see, I'd say probably the most famous mistranslation in the history of the world, from which an entire religion almost has been built, is the idea of the virgin birth, based on a pasuk in the Navi Yeshayahu, in which the Navi refers to an Alma, Ayin Lamed Mem Hey, who will give birth. Now, the word Alma in Hebrew means a young woman. Does not mean a virgin. A virgin is a Tula. However, when it was translated into the Greek, into the Septuagint, the word that was chosen had also an alternative meaning, a young woman, or it could also mean a woman that's a virgin. And then when that in turn was translated into Latin, it's like playing telephone. So if I start by telling you something, by the time I go around the room, when they tell it back to me, that's a different story completely. So then it became fixed as being the virgin. And this is a matter that Jews have brought up to the church for 1,500 years. But in the 19th century, the church became more and more enamored of Mary, and added, the ascension to heaven and all sorts of other things. So it became the Roman Catholic Church is pretty much bound to Mary, not only to Jesus. And because of that, therefore, the virgin birth becomes a tenet of faith. It becomes a matter of belief. So to come now and say that it's a mistranslation, hardly likely that will be accepted, A, and B, it could even be that the church would feel insulted. So, but it's out there. It's in all scholarly works. It's been out there for a long time. But that's part of the problem of translation. So when you have something like the Perush HaMishnayos, which we all know in Torah works, and nuance is very important. You want to explain something, the word that's chosen, the definitive word, how to explain it, carries a great deal of weight. So therefore, the fact that we are working from translation somewhat minimizes the greatness of the book, because of the fact that, so to speak, the author, it's hard to see him behind the translation. But the Perush HaMishnayos is such a great work, and the Rambam is such an imposing figure that with all the problems of translation, we do get a feel of the person. I'll give you an example or two. And the feel of the person is, the Rambam is a supreme rationalist. I discussed that with you here. 38 people live long, so we don't say they live long because of supernatural reasons. They live long because they take care of themselves. So the Rambam is a rationalist in everything. So in the Pirush HaMishnayos is where the 13 principles of faith, which the Rambam enumerated, appears. It appears in the Masechet Sanhedrin, in the last chapter there, and the Rambam has a long discussion of these 13 principles of faith. Now, the 13 principles of faith were not universally accepted. There were great rabbis that disagreed with some of them. They either substituted other ones, or they disagreed with the number of 13, or they disagreed that this is a matter of Jewish faith. Rabbi Levi ben Gershom, Gersonides, and others, Rabbi Yosef Halbo and the Sefer Yikorim, were many people who didn't buy into everything that the Rambam wrote. Nevertheless, the defenders of the Rambam were so numerous that it became accepted in the Jewish world that these are the 13 principles of faith. It became so accepted that a hymn was written, the famous hymn Yigdal, Yigdal Elohim Chai V'Yishtabach. So that hymn is a recitation of the 13 principles of faith according to the Rambam. And the fact that it was included, so for a long time there were really debates as to whether it should be included in the prayer service or not. And as I remember yet in my youth in Chicago, there were certain synagogues that wouldn't still, that was their tradition from wherever they came from, not to recite Yigdal. But today, we live in such a world that nobody even knows what Yigdal, where it came from, so it's not a problem. And it has a nice tune to it. It's melodious, and you send a child up to sing Yigdal, and everybody's happy. So that's the way that's the way it is. But when he advocated the 13 principles of faith, it was not to unanimous consent, and certainly not to unanimous acceptance. One of the principles of faith that the Rambam discusses is the corporeality of God, whether God has, so to speak, any physical type of attribute that we could discuss. Now, the Rambam's opinion of God is definite. The Rambam begins by saying that we know nothing about God and we cannot know anything about God. And that any attempt, so to speak, to define God is already blasphemous. Because when you define something, you limit it. You have to limit it. That's the basis of definition. And since the Lord is limitless, so we have no definition of him. Now, because of that, the Rambam, for instance, says the 13 attributes that we say to God, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, God is merciful, God is patient, God forgives, etc. The Rambam says it doesn't mean that none of those attributes apply to God. The only thing that it means is that God is not merciful. He is not patient. But any adjective that you use to attach to God in a positive sense, so to speak, is itself blasphemous. Because if you say God is patient, then you imply that if he wanted to, he could be impatient. Because of this, the Rambam postulates that every place in the Torah, in Nevi'im, in Ksuvim, where there is any reference to God in an anthropomorphic form. God has hands, God has the ears of God, the mouth of God, right? Any of those statements are purely allegorical and have no reference to God whatsoever. It's only since we're human beings and we're limited by our physicality, we don't understand a world that's not physical.